In the name of the one holy and living God. You may be seated. I am so happy to be serving at Trinity Church this morning. Thrilled, actually. This is a very special church, as you know, and a beacon of social justice in our diocese. And so it was no surprise that there would be attention to Oscar Romero on the eve of his feast day. I also have to say that I love that window where Mary is in the center, and I also love that there's incense. So I'm a happy girl this morning. So even though I'm about to talk about martyrdom, such as that of Archbishop Romero's, because martyrdom gets our attention. Think of George Floyd, not strictly speaking a Christian martyr, since he did not die for his faith explicitly, but he did die for our sins, the sin of racism, and his death catalyzed a movement. We remember his name, we remember his face. That's the power of martyrs. Tomorrow, the 24th of March, memorializes the death of Oscar Romero, saint and martyr, who died on that day in 1980. Not very long ago, really. Which is why I am here and not your rector, who is in El Salvador to mark the occasion. If you have ever visited Westminster Abbey in London, few people probably, right? Since 1995, you will have seen the wall of 20th century martyrs above the Great West Door. This is a very big deal. This is a very old place, the Abbey. And since the year 1066, it has been the location of 40 coronations of British monarchs and a burial site for many others. At least 16 royal weddings have taken place at the Abbey since 1100, including Harry and Meghan, officiated by our dear Michael Curry, former presiding bishop, right? So you get the picture. It's a big deal. It sits right next to the House of Parliament with Big Ben and all that. And it's unusual. It's massive. The statues are way larger than life. And around the Abbey, the other walls are, they have the typical symbols of the faith and figures of the faith, but this wall bears special witness to the significance of martyrs and recent martyrs of the 20th century. Oscar Romero is up there, as is Dr. Martin Luther King, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and 7 others. The statues sit in niches. The niches have been there since the 16th century, evidently, but it was not until 1995 that they were filled with these huge statues. And it's a bit jarring, to stand there and look up and see these contemporary faces, right? Some, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Oscar Romero, are wearing stone spectacles. You don't see that on the other statues. But the one I want to talk about is why now? And I say now loosely, 1995, now. Why were they moved to do that huge, indelible, symbol now? Is there something about the late 20th century, early 21st century era that demands it? I think so. Because this wall will stand and these figures will be remembered. They're there for keeps. Remembered as Moses is remembered in our reading from Exodus. This is a very foundational text. Moses, who encounters God in the burning bush and receives his mission. I'll paraphrase, "Go tell old Pharaoh, let my people go," right? That's the message. And you may or may not know that the book of Exodus, as I say, is a foundational text. It's very special to this day for poor and marginalized people. You can imagine why. Wherever they are, those who are oppressed feel there is no way out, are naturally drawn to the story where God provides a way out. In Exodus, God frees the slaves and guides them to a new land. The hope of liberation is also found in the Gospel of Luke, the other foundational text, chapter 4, where Jesus reads from the scroll of Isaiah, saying, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." In short, God is on the side of the poor and oppressed. God has a preference for the poor and those who are dominated by unjust systems. Now, liberation theology is a whole school of biblical interpretation and its own sort of contextual understanding that was central, as it turns out, to my theological education, because where I went, there were many people on the faculty, Otto Maduro from Venezuela, Ada Maria Isasi Diaz from Cuba, who were part of this movement. And we read Gustavo Gutierrez, who wrote A Theology of Liberation. That's the classic text that many other, although this was in a South American context, other marginalized groups, other oppressed groups have used his text to base their own liberation theology based on their own hoped-for liberation. We read James Cone's book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, where he appropriates Gutierrez for African American people today. So liberation theology actually developed within the Catholic Church in Latin America in the 1960s as a reaction to the extreme poverty and social injustice in the region. It affirms that God is on the side of the oppressed, and it is very context-based, and it is a bottom-up, grassroots relationship with the divine rather than a top-down relationship to the divine. And you can imagine it was not so popular with the church in Rome, who are pretty attached to the top-down style, right? Other marginalized groups, as I mentioned, African Americans, women, LGBTQ people are drawn to the theology, and they tailor it to their own respective communities. My teacher, one of my teachers, Ada Maria Isasi Diaz, Cuban, she's part of the Cuban diaspora, right? She wrote a book called En la Lucha, In the Struggle, for Latina context. Then there is womanist theology, which, of course, there was feminist theology, right? But a lot of it did not speak to black and brown women. So, hence, womanist theology came out of this specific context, their lived lives. Then even there was, we read these books too, Minjong theology emerged in the 1970s from the experience of South Korean Christians in the struggle for social justice. Context, where you sit in life, is important, but all rely on Exodus, that liberation journey through the wilderness that begins with Moses and the burning bush and extends even to our times today, right? We are still on that journey. We're still hope for liberation for all. Now, Oscar Romero may have been in the thick of this movement, but he was a reluctant convert. It was not until his good friend and fellow priest, Rutilio Grande, was assassinated that he chose to speak out. His radio broadcasts, where he denounced the death squads and implored them to stop, became a persuasive tool in the bloody Civil War. The Vatican did not support him, even though he went to Rome to appeal to them. Nor did they embrace liberation theology, because to them it was Marxist. The El Salvadorian government was threatened by him. Even the United States did nothing to stop the death squads. In fact, they financed them They supported the government of El Salvador by sending arms, even after the martyrdom of Archbishop Romero. As you know, he was shot dead while offering Mass at a small hospital chapel. The United Nations designated March 24th, and get ready for this, it's kind of a mouthful, International Day for the Right to the Truth Concerning Gross Human Rights Violations and for the Dignity of Victims. So if anybody asks, where is your rector? Where's Chase? You can say, oh, he's down there celebrating International Day for the Right to the Truth Concerning Gross Human Rights Violations and for the Dignity of Victims, right? Just rolls right off the tongue. Oscar Romero answered the cry of his people just as Moses did. Now, no one is called to be a martyr, not even Oscar Romero, and no one actively seeks it. We have the text of Dr. King's mountaintop speech, the last speech he ever gave before his life was taken, where he says, like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I am not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. So, a martyr's dilemma is choosing between two things of a contradictory nature. In the case of some of the first Christian martyrs, it was to follow the way of Jesus or submit to pagan gods. That was their dilemma. And some of them, if you have ever had the pleasure of reading about the lives of Perpetua and Felicity, those were those early martyrs, and oh my God, they were enthusiastic about their martyrdom. Felicity was pregnant, and Perpetua had an infant son. And her father, who was a pagan, is begging her. You know, you picture her through the bars or something like, come on, don't do this, please don't do this. Consider me, your old father, consider your child. And so she hands the child over to him, but she stays put. So that was their dilemma, and they made their choice. In our times, the dilemma is to stand with the poor and oppressed or submit to repressive demands of a dictatorial state. This was Oscar Romero's choice. Yours, ours, may be on a smaller scale, but there is no question that we, as Christians, are called to be on the side of the poor and oppressed, just as Jesus was. Now, normally, it may not present us with a dilemma, but these are not normal times. Do you agree? They're not normal times, and there are risks. Perhaps you debate with yourself, as I do, whether to freely share your views and persuade others on social media. Because, right, maybe you hold back because you don't want to offend, be considered too political or too partisan, for whatever you suspect your audience is, your certain friends or communities. Maybe you are fearful of online trolls. I know, I never thought of Instagram as a risky proposition, but these days, when so many rights are in peril, what risks are we willing to take? Some of you, like some of my own friends and neighbors, may be planning on attending the demonstration at the Tesla dealership on Route 35. It sounds low risk, but in this age of, surveillance and all that, who knows? I have a story about demonstrating in a way. I found myself in a high school in Newark, New Jersey. I didn't work for them, but I worked for a mental health clinic that posted me there, and I got pretty close to a lot of the girls. And they were going to a Good Friday march in Manhattan, sponsored by Pax Christi, okay? So we stopped at the Stations of the Cross, the big hospital, like sort of the headquarters of Dow Chemicals, or, many things. And the last station was the battleship, is it Intrepid? The one that's in the harbor there? And so we're all gonna lay down, and we're not gonna leave, and then we'll get arrested. I'm like, you know what? I have a babysitter at home. I can't do that with you, sorry. Stay on the battlefield is a refrain from an African American spiritual, I Will Trust in the Lord. Now that happens to be in Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is in your pews. I was looking at it. It's 193. I don't think it has exactly those lyrics, but it's got the same, expresses the same passion. Stay on the battlefield. The late Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan of Sweet Honey and the Rock, anybody know that group, right? They're awesome. Adapted it, along with the poetry of Sonia Sanchez, another amazing woman, to suit her particular context. So you should listen to it. It's on Spotify. Stay on the battlefield. The original spiritual credited to Reverend James Moore has 4 stanzas that repeat one line 4 times, beginning with, I will trust in the Lord. That's the name. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord till I die. Then, I will stay on the battlefield. I will stay on the battlefield till I die. I will stay on bended knee. I will stay on bended knee till I die. Some versions have 5 stanzas, including I will watch and fight and pray till I die. Then they all conclude with, I will treat everybody right. Now the Lift Every Voice version says, I will treat my neighbor right. They're both the same sentiment, right? I will treat everybody right. I will treat everybody right. I will treat everybody right until I die. Now, we are not all cut out for the battlefield, but we can be watchful and prayerful, and even though it may sound obvious, we can treat everybody right. That in itself may be the most revolutionary act of all. It got Dr. King and Bishop Romero killed. It got Jesus crucified. This is a commitment, however, available to all. We made it in our baptismal covenant when we promised to seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourselves, and to strive for justice and peace among all people, and respect the dignity of every human being. All people, every human being, women and children, widows and orphans, pregnant teenagers, black and brown people, migrant people, trans people, all people. So may we, in the spirit of this spiritual, in our imagination, in our hearts and minds, lift them in song. On behalf of Oscar Romero, martyr and advocate for the poor and marginalized, may we sing, I will treat everybody right until I